Okay, welcome everybody. Today is Wednesday, November 4th, and this is our weekly Lunch and Learn. Thank you for joining me, albeit a half hour late. I had another engagement to deal with earlier, and I'm happy to see everyone. I hope everyone is well and feeling well. I know that maybe some people are feeling a little anxious this morning as the nation's future hangs in the balance. But hopefully everyone is managing and is not too nervous. And if you are, I'm happy to spend some time chatting with you if you feel that you need someone to talk to. This, as we know, is the Mitzvah Shiur. We do a different mitzvah each week, a mitzvah connected to the weekly Torah reading. And according to the Sefer HaChinuch, there are no mitzvot explicitly noted in this week's Parsha, but nonetheless, there is a great mitzvah mentioned by Rashi in relation to this Parsha, and that is the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, the mitzvah of visiting the sick. And that's what we are going to talk about today, the mitzvah of visiting the sick. So before we start, does anybody have an idea of where the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim is found in this week's Parsha?
On the Brit.
Excellent, Shula. Okay, so let's get right to it. Let's look at our first source. I did the sources a little differently today. I did them as a slideshow. So here we go. The first source, God visits Avraham, the beginning of the Parsha. Vayeira elav Adonai be'elonei mamrei v'hu. Can you all see the sources on the page on the screen? Yeah. V'hu yoshev petach ha'oel kechom hayom. God appeared to him, Avraham, at the terebinths of Mamre, and he was sitting at the entrance of the tent as the day grew hot. So God came to visit Avraham, and Rashi famously says on that spot. Rashi famously says, "Livaker et hacholeh." That right here, levaker et hacholeh, that God came to visit the sick man. Abraham was sick, and God came to visit him. So that is where that is the connection to this week's parsha, to the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. So what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss different aspects of Bikur Cholim, some of the rules and recommendations of Bikur Cholim. We'll talk about Bikur Cholim during a pandemic. How do you fulfill the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim during a pandemic? And some other interesting things, other interesting things as well. So let's begin with the next source. So the idea, one of the beautiful aspects of visiting the sick comes from this famous statement in the Gemara that says, "V'amar Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Chanina, mai dichtiv acharei Adonai Elohechem telechu." That we should, what does it mean that we should walk after God? After the Lord your God shall you walk. What does that mean to walk after God? Is it possible for a person to walk after God? If you get too close to God, you're going to get burned because God is a fire. So says the Gemara, Ella lahaloch achar midotav. What does it mean to walk after God? Rabbi Soloveitchik really stressed this in many of his writings and speeches. It means to follow his attributes, to mimic God. This is the source we have in the Torah for mimicking God, for copying God's midot. And so now the Gemara is going to go through a series of examples of where God exhibited kindness to others, and that we are obligated to copy that. So let's read this Gemara. Such a beautiful, beautiful Gemara. Mahuma bisharumim dichtiv vayas Hashem Elohim la'adam ulishto katnot or vayal b'shem. God clothed the naked, and we know that from the beginning of Bereshit a few weeks ago, that God gave Adam and Chava clothing. Afatah al beisharumim. So if God gave people clothing, we should imitate God and also give people clothing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu biker cholim. Here's the key that we need. God visited the sick. Where do we know that? Vayeira elav Hashem be'lanei mamrei. Now we know where Rashi got it from. Rashi was quoting this Gemara. Af ata bikor cholim. So if God visits the sick, and we're supposed to follow God's attributes, so we should also visit the sick. HaKadosh Baruch Hu nichem avelim. God comforted the mourner. Dichtiv vahi acharei mot Avraham vayevarech Elohim et Yitzchak beno. That after Abraham died, God blessed, which we understand here to mean comforted, Isaac his son. Af ata nichem avelim. You should also comfort the mourners. HaKadosh Baruch Hu kavor meitim dichtiv vayikaber oto bagai. That God buried Moshe. Af ata kavor meitim. So this is such a beautiful Gemara. The key aspects of chesed that we do. We clothe the naked. We visit the sick. We comfort the mourners, and we bury the dead. And we do that. They're mitzvah to do that, and we also do that as part of the idea of imitating God. So we have the source in this week's Torah of God visiting Abraham, and Rashi gets it from this Gemara. So it's more than just God visited Abraham. It's God visited Abraham, and we are supposed to follow in God's footsteps, and also visit the sick.
Hashem said that no, it says that the Tzelem Elohim bara et Adam, so it's already.
Yes, right. It's built in, right? It's built in to what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be like God. Yes, Zach.
I believe what is missing over here, it's a warning of Cain by Hashem, which teaches us from very beginning we should warn people from doing evil things. I'm surprised that they actually missed it because this is a very powerful gesture we learn from God.
Okay, so thank you, Zach. That's a great question. I think I have an answer. None of these mitzvot are explicit in the Torah, as we're going to see. The responsibility of tochacha, of admonishing someone and warning someone, that is explicit in the Torah. So it could be that this teaching of Chazal, that this teaching of the rabbis is reserved for those mitzvot which are not explicit. And we'll see it. Well, it's a debate whether it's explicit or not. We'll see the Rambam and many other Rishonim do not believe that it's explicit and don't believe even that it is a mitzvah deoraita to visit the sick. They believe that it's not a biblical mitzvah, but that it is a rabbinic mitzvah to visit the sick. So maybe that's why it doesn't include that here. Okay, let's look at the next, and this brings us to the exact point here, Zach. The Rambam says explicitly, mitzvat aseh mi divrehem, right here, that it is a positive rabbinic precept to visit the sick, comfort the mourners, escort the dead, dower the bride, accompany the departing guests. As well, sorry, hold on. I'm trying to get back to the Rambam there. This is a very sensitive screen here. As well as to cheer the bride and groom and to assist them in whatever they need. So you see here, Zach, the Rambam does not consider these to be a mitzvah deoraita, a biblical commandment. He says explicitly that they are rabbinic, positive rabbinic mitzvot, right? Mitzvat aseh shel divrehem. And then he says, but there is a root in the Torah. There's a hint to them in the Torah, maybe. Af al pi shekol mitzvot elu midivrehem, even though all of these mitzvot are rabbinic in origin, as he says down right here, they are implied in the biblical verse, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So It sounds like what the Rambam is saying is that when one visits the sick, one is fulfilling the mitzvah deoraita, the biblical commandment of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. There is no biblical commandment of visiting the sick. It's a rabbinic offshoot, if you will, of the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. So every time you visit the sick, it sounds like you're doing two things. You are fulfilling maybe the biblical commandment of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha and the rabbinic commandment of visiting the sick. This is not the only view. There's another view that says the mitzvah of visiting the sick is deoraita, and this is the view of the Baal Halachot Gedalot, based on this pasuk. Vizharta ethem et hachukim v'et hatorot v'hodata lahem et haderech yelchu ba v'et ha'maaseh asher ya'asun, and you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and shall show them the path wherein they shall walk and the action that they must perform. And the Gemara says that is talking about the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. So according to a minority group, the mitzvah of visiting the sick is a mitzvah d'oraita. But I think the predominant view is that the mitzvah of visiting the sick is a mitzvah d'Rabbana, a rabbinic commandment. Okay. Now let's look at some of the guidance. It's interesting to note that the Talmud gives us lots of guidance as to how to fulfill this mitzvah. So let's look at some of the ideas. Well, let me stop for a second and see if there are any questions or comments. I don't see anything. I don't see anyone's hand up in the participants, and I don't see any chat in the group chat. Anyone have a question or a comment of anything we've said so far? All right, let's carry on then and look at the Gemara in Masechet Nidarim, which is the main place in the Talmud where the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim is discussed. Tanya, Bikur Cholim ein la Shiur. The first thing the Talmud tells us is that visiting the sick has no fixed measure. So what does that mean? What do you think that means? Visiting the sick has no fixed measure.
It says that you don't
How
have to
often?
visit one time or two times. It's all supposed to come based on your availability.
Your ability, right, and the sick person's need, right? Meaning when you light the Hanukkah candles, Hanukkah is in like 35 days. When you light the Hanukkah candles, you did it. That's it. If you light it again, it's not a mitzvah. If you shake the lulav, it's a mitzvah once, as opposed to maybe Bikur Cholim. Okay, we'll see that. Excellent. Okay.
I think it's how often and how much. It's up to you and how much a person needs.
Okay, excellent. Great. Okay, I'm not sure who this is. iPhone, who are you?
I think it's me, Doreen.
Oh, hi, Doreen. Go ahead.
Hi, Rabbi. I think it means that when it says that it has no measure, I think it means that it is such a tremendous mitzvah that you can't put a value on it. Its value is beyond our capacity to express.
Oh, that's really interesting. We're going to see something a little bit later that I think may affirm that idea. Okay, great. Anyone else? Okay, so let's read what the Gemara says. When the Gemara says, Tanya, Bikur Cholim ein la Shiur, my ein la Shiur, what does that mean? That it does not have a fixed measure? Sava Rav Yosef Lemeimar ein Shiur lematan schara. There is no fixed measure for the granting of its reward, like Doreen just said. Amar le Abaye v'chol mitzvot mi yesh shiur lematan scharan. Rav Yosef said, Abaye said to him in response, and do all other mitzvot have a fixed measure for the granting of their reward? V'hatanan have a zahir b'mitzvah kala kivachamura she'ena tayodeh matan scharan shel mitzvot. a direct challenge from Abaye to Rav Yosef and to Doreen. What do you mean this is a special mitzvah that has, we don't know what the measure of mitzvot are, which is why the Talmud tells us, this is in Pirkei Avot, we are supposed to treat all mitzvot equally, right? All mitzvot are created equal. We are supposed to treat the mitzvot equally because we don't know which ones come with the greatest schar, with the greatest merit and reward, and which ones don't. So what are we supposed to do? So what could you possibly mean? Rav Yosef, Abaye asks. Ela Amar Abaye afilu gadol etzal katan. Rava Amar afilu mea pamim bayom. Two different answers. One says that even a prominent person would visit a lowly person. So we may think that an important person shouldn't go visit a sick person who's just a commoner because it's below their kavod to do that. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the case. Engla Shiur, meaning there's no measure. We don't measure between important, unimportant, rich, poor. Any sick person deserves to be visited. And another opinion in the Gemara is afilu mea pa'amim, even 100 times a day. Like we said, it depends on what the person needs. It depends on our ability to do so. Let me stop here and ask you a question. How sick do you have to be to warrant a sick visit? Meaning, I have a headache, my back hurts, I'm Charlie horse from my bicycle ride, and you come visit me. Is that a mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, or do I have to be in bed? Do I have to be incapacitated? Has anyone ever thought of that? I mean, I have the sniffles. I got too much, pollen in the air, and I can't stop sneezing. Nitza, what do you think?
Looks like there is no measure when you're going to respect somebody else and be coming. It could be an emotional help here when you come to visit somebody. It's not necessarily that he has to have fever or even open heart surgery. No, anything you do for others is considered a mitzvah. And it could be that the other person is very upset.
So Nitza, you just said something very interesting.
A measure to come and console you.
Yeah, so you just said something very interesting. Anything you do for someone is a mitzvah. That's true. But my question is it the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim? Meaning, let's say I have allergies.
You might be very sick with it.
Someone comes to visit me and says, how you doing? I hope you're feeling better. That is definitely a function of chesed and definitely a function of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The question, though, I'm asking, is it a function of Bikur Cholim? Those are different things.
Yes, why not?
Yeah, I think some people need help mentally, not only physically.
Okay, let's leave that aside for a second. Why not Chana, your question, why not, is because what's my obligation? Meaning, am I? We don't want to look at life only as the need to fulfill obligations. But if someone's sick, I'm obligated to visit them. That's what the mitzvah is. Ein la shiur. I have to visit them. So how sick do they have to be for me to have to visit them?
But even
if I
if
don't, hold on, one at a time. And if I don't visit them, and let's say I don't visit someone with allergies, have I nullified a positive mitzvah by not visiting them? Maybe not, because maybe that level of sickness doesn't require Bikur Cholim. It's a function of chesed, no doubt about it, but I may not be obligated. Anyway, I want to set that aside. It's just something to think about, because I think it's an important question, because we often hear that someone's not feeling well. And as soon as I hear that someone's not feeling well, does that mean that I have to go visit them or I have to call them up? I don't know. I think that's where we in all areas of halacha, right? We want to clearly and carefully identify our obligation, right? So I'll give you an example. Hanukkah's coming again. I have to light Hanukkah candles. So I need to know when, with what, how long it has to last, where I have to put it. So the same thing with the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. Who do I have to visit? When do I have to visit them? Right? I have to be able to clearly say this is how one fulfills the mitzvah, right? It's like any other mitzvah. Same thing with kashrut, Shabbat, Bikur Cholim. You're going to bury the dead. How do you fulfill that mitzvah? How is the person buried? Right? Every mitzvah needs to be clearly identified, including Bikur Cholim. Okay, next.
Suppose you don't want to have a guest to visit you.
Okay, we'll get
Don't
there.
want to.
Good question. Excellent question. Okay, let's continue.
What
Let's
about
continue.
people who are homebound for an extended period of time? They can't leave the house. But
Okay.
they're not really sick. They're just old, maybe in
Okay,
you
so
know,
then we have
capacity.
so helping them is a function of chesed, but not a function of Bikur Cholim,
Okay.
right? There are other, right? It's not the only mitzvah in the world. If I keep Shabbos, I'm not fulfilling the mitzvah of visiting the sick. So if I visit a homebound person, I'm doing, by the way, that may be a function of visiting the sick, as we'll see, but even if it's not, it's a function of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, which is, that's a mitzvah d'oraita. So, yeah. Okay, here we go.
COVID, so we don't visit.
Let's go. Next Gemara. I see you, Nitza, but we have to move forward. I'll get you in a minute. Okay. Rav Chelbo fell ill. Rav Chelbo ba'ish. Lo ika deka ate. And no one came to visit him. Amar lehu. Lo kach haya maseh b'talmid echad mitalmidei Rabbi Akiva shechala. So, Rav, in the previous Gemara, Rav Kahana was talking to them, so no one came to visit him. Rav Kahana said, didn't the incident involving one of the students of Rabbi Akiva who became sick transpire in that manner, that also no one came to visit him? Lo nichnasu chachamim levakro, one of the students of Rabbi Akiva was sick and no one came to visit him? The nichnas Rabbi Akiva levakro, and here, look at this. Remember we said even the great person visits the common person, so here the great Rabbi Akiva visited his student. The nichnas Rabbi Akiva levakro uvishvil shekibdu v'ribtzu lefanav chaya. And because Rabbi Akiva swept and sprinkled water on the dirt floor before the sick student, he recovered. We have to unpack what that line means, right? Just because Rabbi Akiva swept the floor and put water on the floor so that it was a dirt floor, so the dust wouldn't come up. That's why the person got better. Amar lo Rabbi Hechietani. And after Rabbi Akiva did those things, like cleaned his room, he said, Rebbe, you have revived me. Yatsa Rabbi Akiva v'darash kol mi she'ein mevaker cholim ke'ilu shofech damim. If you don't visit the sick, it's as if you spilled blood. So I'll go back to what I said a minute ago. So now we really better know who we're obligated to visit. Because if we don't visit the people we're obligated to visit, it's as if we've shed blood. So does that mean, so who do I have to visit? I really want to know now, because I don't want to be a shofech damim. Right, I don't want to be someone who sheds blood. So let's unpack what this Gemara means. Here on the side, where it says background, and since they swept and sprinkled water on the dirt floor before the sick student, it is understood from the narrative that the sick student was in a small and airless bedroom. Dust gathers in a place like this, and the air becomes stifling. The dust was cleared, and the room was ventilated when they swept and sprinkled water on the floor. Removal of the other polluting factors that had certainly exacerbated the condition of the ill student also contributed to his recovery. So here we see that an aspect of visiting the sick is taking care of the needs of the sick person. Okay, taking care of the needs of the sick person. Meaning we have to also ask the question, what's the point of visiting the sick? Right? What are we doing? What are we supposed to do when we visit the sick? It's not, just, hi, how are you? There are, I think the later authorities, and we'll see them, identify three main things that we're supposed to do upon visiting the sick. And this is one of them, taking care of the needs of the sick person. Okay. The Gemara continues. And here we're going to uncover, so the first need of taking care of the sick person, we're seeing the first aspect of Bikur Cholim, which is taking care of the needs of the sick person, we're seeing here. But let me ask you another question before we move on. I think I know what many people are going to say, but according to this Gemara, and this is how many of the commentaries understand it, and the Shulchan Aruch, and even the later authorities understand this, that one of the things we're supposed to do, one of the reasons we visit the sick, is to take care of their needs. Okay? So let me ask you a question. In the time of Rabbi Akiva, the person was sick, there were no hospitals. If Rabbi Akiva didn't go and take care of this person, there would have been no one to take care of the person. Okay, so now someone's in a hospital and their needs are taken care of. They have nurses, they have doctors, someone brings them 3 meals a day. Does the mitzvah Bikur Cholim on that level still apply?
Yes,
Who said that?
Ani Hana.
Lama?
Because you want to visit your friend, your relative, the people that the sick person knows and he can relate to.
Hold on, Chana, let me, I want you to be careful to answer the specific question I asked. According to this first Gemara, the reason we visit the sick are to take care of the needs of the sick person.
But these are emotional needs.
But this is physical needs. I'm just asking on this aspect because you're right. We're gonna expand it. But on this aspect of physical needs, it sounds like, even from your answer, Chana, that maybe not.
No.
Now, it's not the end of the story.
No, because it's not enough. Because if let's say, God forbid, your husband or wife, you want him to be with you because the needs are so high. Every other minute, the nurse cannot be there every second.
That's what I thought people were going to say, right? Exactly. I thought people were going to say, no, even though if the person's in a hospital, we all know if we've ever had an experience, people in the hospital, it always helps.
Exactly.
That there's an advocate there to make sure that everything's being taken care of. Exactly.
Yeah,
okay. Now, by the way, Chana, you're right about emotional needs are also important. We're going to get to that. That's the third aspect. But here now,
especially in the Corona time when people are so depressed that they can die from depression.
Yes, 100%.
Super important.
Let's introduce the second aspect of Bikur Cholim. So the first aspect of Bikur Cholim is take care of the needs of the person, which Chana argues, and I think it's a fine point, and I would agree with it, that even physical needs are not fully taken care of in the hospital.
That's right.
And you need a person there who will be able to check with the doctors and make sure that everything that the person needs is taken care of. Okay, next. Kiata Rav Dimi Amar, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said, Kol hamivaker et hacholeh goreim lo sheyichyeh. Listen to this. Anyone who visits the sick causes them to live. Kol she'eino mivaker et hacholeh goreim lo sheyamut. And anyone who does not visit the sick causes them to die. That's quite a statement. What does that mean? It causes them to die. My grandma, the Gemara says, really? Does that mean is that true? Right? In what way are the actions the cause of the person's death? Ilema kol hamivaker et hacholeh mivakesh elav rachamim sheyichyeh, v'kol she'ein mivaker et hacholeh mivakesh elav rachamim sheyamut. Sheyamut salkadaitach doesn't mean that anyone who visits the sick will daven, will pray that they should live, and anyone who doesn't visit the sick will pray that they should die. Is that possible? Of course not. What does it mean? Ella kol she'ein mivaker choleh ein mivakesh elav rachamim lo sheyichyeh v'lo sheyamut. That when one visits the sick, if one does not visit the sick, one will not pray for them. Meaning, even though we pray for people, even though we don't visit them, what the Gemara here is saying, when you go to a hospital room and you see someone in the hospital bed, or you visit them at home and you see that they are sick, the type of prayer, the level of prayer, the intensity of prayer may be different. Because Eino Dome, the Gemara says elsewhere, Shmi'ah L'Ri'iyah. You can't compare hearing about something to seeing it. And seeing and being with the sick person has a profound effect on the visitor. So now we have two reasons we're supposed to visit the sick. One is to take care of their physical needs, and two is to be inspired to pray for them. Okay, to be inspired to pray for them. And the Gemara is going to talk about this further. Let's see the next. We'll see the Ramban here. Based on this Gemara, the Ramban says this very powerful point. Kasher mivakrim et hacholeh v'roim et matzavo. Like we just said, when you go to visit the sick and you see their situation, samim leiv yoter ki yesh litpalel b'kavanah lemano. We will pay more attention and will have greater intention in their prayers on their behalf. Anu lomdim mikan. Listen to this very powerful statement of the Ramban. We learn from this. Ki anu mivakrim et hacholeh kedei lehitorer levakesh rachamim alav. We visit the sick in order to be inspired to ask for mercy on their behalf. Lachein imivaker adam et hacholeh ve'eno mivakesh alav rachamim lo kiyem et hamitzvah. Wow! If you go to visit the sick, and you go and you say hi, and you even take care of their needs, and you make sure they have everything they want, and you make sure the doctors and nurses are paying attention. If you don't daven for them, you have not fulfilled your obligation of visiting the sick. Very powerful, because it sounds like the Ramban is saying, such a beautiful point, that if you go and see someone and you're emotionally moved by it and you don't use that moment to pray, you're wasting a chance. You're wasting a golden opportunity to offer a heartfelt prayer, because once you leave the room, you're not going to feel the same anymore. It's going to wear off. But when you're there, when you're in the room with the person, it's very powerful, and therefore, and the intensity of the prayer, as the Ramban said, is heightened. So we now see two reasons to visit the sick: one, to take care of their needs, and two, to pray. All right, I see some people have some comments or questions. Let's take a break. Nitza, go ahead.
What is the prayer you're supposed to pray? Does it say here?
No, it doesn't. That's a really good question.
I'm supposed to know by myself?
You could do it on your own, yeah, or you could say the Mishaberach for Cholim that is said in Shul on Shabbat, or you could just say.
It's not related to the person himself, no?
Well, it is, because you add the name, right? Mishaberach Avotenu, etc. Hu Yivarech v'Yirapeh Tacholeh Chaim Yankel ben Shmerel. Well, you do the mother's name, so Chaim Yankel ben
Dvora.
Genta, right? Right? Or you could do, by the way, this is a good time to mention, good trivia question. What is the shortest prayer that we have recorded in Jewish literature? Let's see.
Shema.
Linda?
The Briut.
Linda.
When Moses prays for his sister Miriam, it was just basically God heal Miriam.
Excellent, Linda. El,
Hey.
na, rifa,
Refa
na, la. 5 words. So there you go, Nitza. That's another one. El, na, rifa, na, la. Rifa, lo. Right? 5 words. Right? So you could make up your own tefillah. Excellent question. Well, Baruch Rofei Cholim is only after the person's healed.
Yeah.
Right? You can't say Baruch Rofei Cholim before the person's healed. Okay. Let's keep going.
Rabbi,
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Shula.
I have a comment.
Supposed to risk your own health just in order to l'kayem the mitzvah?
Ooh, that's a good question. Hold that thought. We're going to get to that. That's the question we're going to deal with, visiting the sick during a pandemic. Hold that thought. Good question. We'll get there.
Okay, Rabbi.
Chana.
Okay. It's a comment from my own experience. 13 years ago, I got sick with cancer, and I was told that I have cancer in level 4, which is the highest level. And Dr. Cooperman did the surgery on me. Thanks God, I'm still here today.
That's Shula's son-in-law.
Shula's son-in-law. So I'm telling you that because at that time I was working at Chabad Torah School, and like 25 years in a row. So my students that became already fathers to their own children everybody was like, wow, Mora Hana got sick. It was like, oh my God, like, you know. So all the yeshiva bocherim that were in Johannesburg, in Tzfat, in Toronto, in California, in you name it, New York, all the yeshivot that they started to spread out the name to pray for Hannah. And I'm telling you that has such an impact on me that I do believe that I got cured thanks to the doctors, that's for sure, but also thanks to these prayers, because it was such an emotional thing, and a thing that I, until this very day, I cannot forget all these prayers that people prayed for me.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. So that goes to the importance of prayer and the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. Okay.
Also, I want one more little comment. It says that when you visit the sick, you take away like kind of 10% from
1/60th. 1/60th.
Or whatever.
We'll see. We'll see that in a minute. Yes.
Yeah, you take away from his pain.
Yes. Excellent.
And that's
Thank
true.
you.
אני חוויתי את זה. I experienced that. It's
Okay.
very, very true.
Amazing. Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Next source about visiting the sick. When are we supposed to visit the sick? Rav Shesha, Amar Rav Shesha Bereid Rav Idi Lo Lisod Inish Kitzira Lo Betlat Shai Kadmaita Lo Betlat Shai Batraita Diyoma. Let one not visit a sick person neither during the first 3 hours of the day, nor in the last 3 hours of the day. Why? There's something about the early part of the day and late part of the day that will cause the person who's visiting not to daven. So why is that? Talat shai kadmeta ravcha date batraita takef chulshe. The last 3 hours of the day, during the first 3 hours of the day, the sick person is relieved. Maybe they've gotten a good night's sleep, they're feeling better. And so you're not going to daven as hard for them because they're going to be okay. They're going to look to you like they're fine. And the last 3 hours of the day, the person's weak because they've gone through a whole day. And you may feel that there's no hope in praying for that person. So you don't want to say a tfilat shav, I guess. You don't want to say a meaningless, empty prayer. And so you want to go when the person is somewhere in the middle where they're not feeling so great, but not feeling so terrible, so that you will still feel like praying them, still feel like praying for them. Okay. Now, of course, when we can go to the hospital is dependent on the visiting hours, not necessarily when we would want to go or not want to go. Okay. Let's jump ahead a little bit here. Because I want to make sure we hit some of the questions that were asked. Here we're talking about the reward of the sick. So let me just go back and just show you one thing, just so we understand that the reward for the sick is considered, the reward for visiting the sick is considered to be very great. We say these paragraphs every morning in Shacharit. Elu divarim she'ein lahem shiur. Remember, we said the Gemara said that, right? That visiting the sick has no shiur. So one of them is, this is fascinating. The Gemara here is telling us that when you visit the sick, you have two rewards, right? We have a reward in Olam Hazeh, v'hakeren kayemet lo, and the principal reward is preserved in the world to come, right? Normally, when we eat away at the principal, it's gone, right? If I take money out of the bank today, it's not going to earn money tomorrow because it's gone. I took it out of I sold my stock, so my stock's not going to earn money tomorrow. So here the Gemara is saying, no, when it comes to visiting the sick, not only do I benefit from having the cash on hand, so to speak, I'm also, the mitzvah is still preserved. So I get the reward I get in this world does not diminish the return on the mitzvah that I'm going to get in the next world. And there's only a few mitzvot that are in that category, and one of them is visiting the sick. So I mention that again to highlight the importance of visiting the sick. Okay. Some other aspects here of the importance of visiting the sick. And now we come to some statements in the Shulchan Aruch about visiting the sick. Mitzvah levaker cholim, hakrovim v'achayverim nichnasim miyad v'archukim achar gimel yamim. V'im kafatz alav hacholi, elu ve'elu nichnasim miyad. In the first few days, the Shulchan Aruch's advice is not to visit the sick unless you're a relative. You want to give the person a chance to get their act together. But if the person got sick very quickly, if the sick person got sick very quickly and it overtakes them and they're really in a bad state, then anyone can visit them right away. The Gemara here talks about visiting a prominent person to visit a humble person, even many times a day. And even if the visitor is of the same age as the invalid, like we've said before, one who increases his visits is considered praiseworthy, provided he does not trouble him, right? We said it all depends on the ability of the visitor and the needs and the desire of the person who's sick. Some say that an enemy may visit a sick person. However, this does not seem plausible to me, but he should not visit a sick person, nor comfort a mourner whom he hates, so that the latter should not think that he rejoices at his misfortune, right? Something, your arch enemy comes into your hospital room, your first thought is, oh, he's only coming to gloat, to see that I'm sick, to make himself happy. So you got to be really careful. This is a big ben adam lechavero issue that we have to be careful about to make sure our visit is really going to be considered helpful. Okay, I want to move ahead to the question of, we have to ask rachamim, right? We have to ask, but it says, when one prays for the mercy of a patient, if one is doing so in the patient's presence, one may pray in any language he desires, but if it's not in the patient's presence, one must only pray in Hebrew. We're not going to get into that right now. Okay. Visiting the sick during a pandemic. Right, so this was the question Shula asked: do you have to endanger yourself to visit the sick or not? So this is from Rabbi Abraham Steinberg, who is a leading medical ethicist in Israel, and he wrote a whole kuntrus, a whole small book really on issues related to Corona. And he said as follows: the primary fulfillment of Bikur Cholim, I'll just show you for a second here that it's here in Hebrew, but we're going to read it in English. The primary fulfillment of Bikur Cholim is actually going to the house of the patient and fulfilling all the purposes of the mitzvah, including nursing and environmental support, as we already saw in the Gemara. However, due to the severity of the contagiousness of the coronavirus, it is forbidden to visit a patient in quarantine or who is hospitalized. Now, that may have been early on. Now, some hospitals are allowing visitors, but not quarantine visitors, right? People who are sick with corona are not getting visitors. There's a difference between someone who is hospitalized during corona and someone who has corona. So visiting someone with corona, he says, you're not supposed to do. Therefore, the situation must be seen as not ideal, and one can fulfill the mitzvah, or at least part of it, by phone. There's a big discussion in the contemporary poskim, in the contemporary authorities, whether or not one fulfills the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim by telephone. And he says it's not ideal. It's best to go in person. But in a situation like this, where there's no choice, then one can certainly fulfill the mitzvah by phone. At the very least, one fulfills the mitzvah of chesed in this way. And this is what we said earlier. Even if one does not fulfill the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, one is still doing something nice for the person. It's not meaningless. It just may technically not be a fulfillment of Bikur Cholim, but he says it is. He says it is in any case. It is better to fulfill the mitzvah of visiting the sick via electronic devices than to enable one to see the patient while they speak, since that fulfills the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim according to all opinions. So he says, if you need to visit someone during Corona and you can't, then you should do it through video, video chat, through Zoom, or through WhatsApp, or through Apple, whatever the Apple thing is called, right? Because seeing the person face to face, remember we said, when you see the person, you will be more inspired to daven for them. And it also makes them feel a lot better when they could have face to face, makes the sick person feel a lot better when they could have face to face contact. So Rav Steinberg says you fulfill the mitzvah Bikur Cholim 100% through video, and mostly through telephone as well. Okay. I'm going to skip this slide because I want to show you something else. Shula, this is for you. You asked, do you have to endanger yourself in order to fulfill the mitzvah of visiting the sick? So Rabbi Soloveitchik wrote this about his father. Rabbi Soloveitchik was talking about this issue about visiting the sick and putting yourself in danger, and he tells a story of his grandfather, Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, pictured here. V'yadua ha'ma'aseh she'ira b'brisk, right? They lived in Brisk. Ba'et shehaya magefat cholera, shemaran hagon Rav Chaim zichrono zecher tzadik livracha hitasek ba'atzmo ubigufo betipul hacholim. So during the cholera epidemic in Brisk, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik would personally tend to the sick. V'amar hagon Rav Chaim zatzal demei hagemara hanal muchach sheyesh chiyuv letapel b'cholim afilu b'makom sheyesh chashas sakana. And he proved from a Gemara that one has to visit the sick even if there is a possibility of getting sick. Ulam, so Rabbi Soloveitchik himself is wondering about this, right? Why is that permitted? Why are you allowed to put yourself in danger to visit the sick? Ulam hagon Rav Chaim zatzal amar diyesh lechalek ben hecha diyesh vaday sakana lehecha diyesh rak chashash v'safek sakana. We have to distinguish between a situation where there is a definite chance of one getting sick and one there is only a safek, a possibility of danger. Hecha diyesh vaday sakana, when there's definite danger, ein dochin nefesh mipnei nefesh. We do not exchange one life for the other. And one is not obligated in such a case then to put themselves in a situation of danger to save their friend. However, if it's a safek sakana, one would be obligated to do that. So I would think that maybe Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik and the other people back then did not understand just how dangerous cholera was, and that it was probably a vaday sakana. But in any case, Rabbi Soloveitchik makes the distinction between vaday, definite danger, and safek, or at least he said that's the distinction his grandfather made. Okay, very quickly here, Rav Asher Weiss, a contemporary authority, says actually that one does not fulfill the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim through the phone. The mitzvah is Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. And he says that means physically visiting the sick. And there are three things that we're supposed to do when we visit the sick. One is to pray for them. One is to look after the needs of the other person. And then the third one that you all mentioned, which was offering encouraging words, right? Giving them emotional support. And he says it has to be done in person. If you can't do it in person, then of course you should call the person. And that would be a function of chesed, but not necessarily a function of Bikur Cholim. However, I'll share this one other view with you, which I think is really interesting. I think I may have it in English. Hold on. No, I don't have it in English, but I'll read it to you in Hebrew. This is from Rav Yitzchak Hutner, and he received a letter. And he apologizes that he hasn't gotten back to the person so quickly. And he answers as follows. B'guf ha'chakira b'vadai she'atzedek hi kichlateto shel kivod torato ki kol Ezra hamugeshet lechole b'torat chole nichlelet hi b'mitzvah bikur cholim. Any help you give to a sick person in the context of their illness is considered to be bikur cholim. And he goes on to explain. Ve'ena inyan taloi ela be'umdana shel mili da'alma im yesh b'pula hanidonit mishum hakala l'chalyo shel adam. There's only one factor that matters. Is what you are doing making the person feel better? Are you relieving them of their suffering? V'lo od ela shenira ki targuma shel hamila bikur b'vitoy bikur cholim eno visit. The translation of the word bikur cholim doesn't mean visiting the sick. Bilaz in the foreign language, meaning in English. Elash hatargumohu milashon bikoret tihiyeh. Kilomar ha'iyun b'matzavo shel hacholeh. What's a bikoret? Right, in court, a bikoret is an examination. You examine the witness. You're right. So that's what this means. You're examining the situation. You're checking on the sick person. An investigation, checking on the status. Investigation. Says there's no fundamental difference between a phone call or doing it any other way. Ki Hakol kalul b'chovat ha'iyun l'shem Ezra b'matzavo shel hacholat. All included in the obligation to investigate how the person is doing. Kol ze barur mibli shum pikpuk. That is obvious, he says, and clear without any doubt. Now, I would take issue a little bit because I think visiting in person is emotionally better for the sick person. But he says, if you, certainly Rav Hutner would argue that if you can't do that, visiting the sick through telephone or through video is 100% fulfillment of the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. Rav Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg is of the same view, that it's also a fulfillment of the mitzvah. And why? Beautiful language here. V'nishar rak hato'aliyot shel gerimat nachat ruach v'shel bakashat rachamim. Right? It's true that when you're on the phone, you can't help the person with their physical needs, but you can daven for them and you give them nachat ruach. Right? You make them feel better. Someone cares about me. Someone took the time to call me. Someone cares about me. That's what Bikur Cholim is about. How sick? I said before, there's a debate. We don't have time to get into that. But certainly if someone's in the hospital, they qualify. And if someone is sick at home and they can't get up and take care of their own needs and cook and shop, they also qualify. Okay, so that is Bikur Cholim. We weren't able to go through all of it. It's a huge topic. There's still so much more to talk about. But it's an important topic. We see that the reward for it is endless, actually. And there are three things we're trying to accomplish when we visit the sick, right? To be inspired to daven for them. The Ramban says if one visits the sick and doesn't daven for them, has not fulfilled their obligation. 2, we want to make sure that all their physical needs are taken care of. And 3, we want to give them nachat ruach. We want to make them feel just emotionally better, which may, in fact, contribute to their physical well-being as well. Okay, everyone. Yasher koach.
Rega, Rabbi.
Yes.
Can I have a comment?
You want to show? Go ahead.
I just want to tell one more little thing from that surgery that I had. After the surgery, I had many visitors. So my doorhouse was not closed at all. So all the time people came. So, but I must tell you that when people come to visit the sick, sometimes they don't know what to do and what to say. They are kind of sitting there and they are embarrassed kind of. So my daughter did a great thing that I'm recommending it and I'm telling it to everyone. She took a poster and she wrote 10 commandments for the for visiting the sick or visiting her mother. So she said, dear friend, thank you for coming to visit my mother. While you are here, she needs the following things. Every hour, she needs to put drops in her eye. Because I was paralyzed half off in my face and in my hands, she said, she needs to move her mouth and eyes. Number 3, she needs to lift her hands. Number 4, every hour she needs to take a painkiller. Number 5, and blah, blah, blah. I don't remember all of them.
Right.
And it was 10 commandments to visit the sick. And when people came, it was amazing because they read, it was in front of them, hanging by the entrance to the kitchen, and they read it and they said, okay, come on, did you lift your hands? Not
Right.
yet, let's do it
Good.
together.
Smart.
Did you take your medicine? Let's give you a glass of water.
Great idea.
And I involved them in the process of healing, and it was amazing.
That's a great idea.
Also, when
Thank
I
you.
went to do radiation, people volunteered to take me to the radiation. On the way back, every time we stopped by a Starbucks, we had coffee, and I turned it, instead of being something sad, I told him, let's have coffee and make a party, even though my face were burning from the radiation. That's what I wanted to tell you guys.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Hope you're all feeling well. Sending you all love, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Rabbi Gelman. It was great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.